Let the discussion begin. It's time for TWS Talking Point.
Look in my eyes, what do you see? The personality.
And we're back. Do you know, I still can't decide whether I like that music or his older music more.
I don't know, I quite like this.
I said when he first changed over, I was like, I hate it. Yeah. When he first changed his music, I was like, no, that's not CM Punk. I don't like that at all.
It has grown on me.
Definitely.
But it's his old Ring of Honor music. It's what he used to play there.
But I do still prefer the old one, I think.
Kill Switch Engage.
Yeah.
Is that what it was called?
Yeah, it was spot on, actually.
It's been a while since we heard that, so it's a wonder. You can forget things so easily in this business, can't you? If you haven't heard it for a while, trying to remember it kind of just goes out your head.
Don't forget, guys, you can always suggest that on our theme of the week every week on Facebook at TWS Live. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about music. We are going to talk about CM Punk and with his alleged, I'm saying alleged, blading in the recent match on Raw this week against Jerry the King Lawler. We want your thoughts and your comments on blood and blading in the business.
Actually, we want to thank Stuart Thompson on Facebook.com/TWS Live for actually asking us to discuss this. So if you've got any talking points that you want us to do that are topical in the week, post them on the Facebook wall, and if we can, we will do them. So, is it needed? I think it's the big question to kick off with. Is blading needed now in today's product?
Blading or bleeding?
Let's look at blading.
Well, there's two different things, aren't there?
Yeah.
I think we need to be clear on that when we discuss this.
Okay, so let's clarify what blading is. Blading is when you're a worker in the ring who gets a razor blade and cuts just under the eyebrow, and then you bleed
Under
from
the eyebrow? Under the hairline.
Under the hairline, sorry. Then gets a force punch, and that will start bleeding. It will open up the wound. Bleeding is when you bleed.
Yeah, when you get it the hard way, basically.
Hard way, as it's called in the business.
A legitimate bump.
Yeah. So, back in the day, we're talking, what, maybe 6-7 years ago? Probably not even that far. Blading was quite commonplace. As far back as probably 3 years ago within TNA,
it was happening all the time.
It was happening pretty much. It was almost unusual to have a match which didn't have some kind of blood.
You can go closer to that. You can go last year with Ric Flair. Every time he stepped foot in the ring, he bladed.
Exactly. So, a question we want to put out to you guys on Facebook and on Twitter and also on the chat room. We want to know, what do you think? Do you miss blading? Do you think it adds something to the match? Or, as it's been so long now and we are kind of always conditioned not to have it, do we need it back?
I kind of think... I mean, I'll never agree with blading. To
Why
be
not?
honest, I personally don't think that you should take someone and start cutting open your own skin.
But it's one of those things in wrestling that it's been such a, not a tradition, but it's been a ritual involved in the matches for donkeys. As long as we've all been wrestling fans, that to get that sort of graphic appeal in a matches where you've had like a no holds barred match or one of the old fashioned hardcore matches, to get that emphasis of the match was brutal and the match was an impact, they used to blade, but we never criticised it back in the day. But now we're criticising it. Is that because of the fact that we're used to this PG era?
No, I think sort of coming on from my point, I said I don't agree with blading. If it's going to happen, I think it needs to be used at the right time. I've got no issue with if there's blood involved in a match itself. I think if it's at the right time. I think when you look at CM Punk versus Jerry Lawler on Raw, there was no need for there to be any blood in that match because it's a nothing match, with all due respect to both guys.
I agree.
Lawler versus Punk is a nothing match. When you had Lesnar versus Triple H on SummerSlam, having this, no rules, don't disqualify anyone, don't do this, don't do that, that would for me be an opportunity, if you were going to use it, for someone to bleed.
I agree, actually, and I think it's a very good point Steve's made there. You have that almost impactful kind of, as Andy said, image of someone with the old crimson mass, as it used to be called, with blood pouring down their face. You want that for your end of your feuds, or maybe I suppose potentially to start a feud.
It's either the blow off or that beginning. I mean, there's things that are epic when you look at in blood. I mean, I want to go to the chat room. A couple of comments from one from Teeve. I think blood can add drama to it. Look at Austin versus Bret Hart, with the iconic image of Austin being in the sharpshooter with blood running down his face. Without blood, would it have been so impactful?
And a lot of guys have commented on that, because we also asked on Facebook for your most memorable bloody moments, and that one came up almost in spades.
Well, the other one is Vince, isn't it? When he kind of peers over the ringside at Mania 19.
We'll come on to that in a bit, though. Let's discuss this blading situation.
Okay, no problem at all.
So, with regards to the actual blading itself, Okay. First of all, do we think Punk bladed on Raw this week? Let's come back, because that's another set of we need to get. Was it actual a blade job, or was it hard way?
Do you know what? I did right up until the show, and I've been watching it back. I've been watching that match, I've been watching it on YouTube, watching it on the dirt sheets, and I do actually think now it was a genuine hit his head on the cage. The reason I'm saying that is twofold. A, it's a no-go area in WWE to blade now, and there's been no story coming out of him being punished, of him being fined, or anything like that. Is that because he's got more stroke in the company than what we know now?
Well, there's been rumors going around the dirt sheet that he's been fined for this, but I don't think that's actually been confirmed, has it? With regards to the fine he's actually received,
about $500,000.
Really?
Is the
when I saw,
figure that went
I
out.
thought it was hard way. I must admit, I didn't even question the blading when I saw it. I just assumed it was a hard way kind of punch or hit against the cage. I just assumed that he didn't. I didn't even see where the blood first go. I just glanced away from the TV. I was making notes of the show. Glanced back up, he's bleeding. I was like, oh, he must have been hard way. Towards the end of the match, because he'd wiped the majority of the blood off, I kind of assumed it was hard way. Just kind of one of those things.
Well, F4W Online reports that CM Punk was not fined any amount of money, especially a huge amount like $500,000, and there was no fine issued to referee Charles Robinson. Now, Punk's post that he put on Twitter, from Melbourne, were tongue-in-cheek, and word is that the WWE officials believe the cut on his head was actually from hitting the cage. Now, there is also a point backstage where a lot of officials are thinking that with the blood and the hardcore feel to that Jerry Lawler CM Punk match, that Raw might start to have a bit of a harder, edgier edge to it. So are we...
Or is that just wishful thinking?
Is that wishful thinking? Are we kind of coming out of the PG era now?
Well, no, because Lindsay McMahon's still running for Senate, so no, we're not coming out of the PG era.
But in that case, that leads us on to something else. Blading or bleeding, whichever way you want to look at it. Are WWE hypocritical, okay, for putting out a PG product and they ram it down our throats each and every week? It's a PG product. It's not the Attitude Era, which they've clearly been saying.
They've done everything to kind of distance themselves from that, if anything.
They've been talking about it during the whole Perfect Storm match at SummerSlam and the build-up to that. They've been saying we're PG, it's not the Attitude Era. Then this happens. And you have the blood on TV or the blood on pay-per-view. Blood on pay-per-view you can understand if it's a legitimate cut. There's nothing you can do about it. If this is part of the storyline and he has bladed and he's blood on TV, are WWE being hypocritical for allowing blood on the TV?
On TV. Scotty T20's actually tweeted us, which you can do at TWS Mania. He said, blood isn't needed. It works in certain feuds, but less is more works here. The less there is, the more it means when it's used.
It has that I come back to saying, well, again, that impact when you suddenly see it, it kind of makes you stop and kind of wow, that it's been so long since we've seen blood. And there's a very good point actually from I think it's from Jamie in the chat room with regards to but blading is an incredibly dangerous thing and pointless, considering, as I put here, the blood is mixed in the match and it can cause possible blood diseases or other kind of illnesses. It's a very good point with HIV, hepatitis. It's been so prevalent nowadays.
I was about to say the same thing because back between the feud between Undertaker and Randy Orton, and you had Cowboy Bob Orton, who's got hepatitis, and he bled.
And the Undertaker
went nuts because that was not meant to happen.
Well, that's why he got released.
Yeah, because he bladed. And that wasn't meant to happen.
Well, he got released because he didn't inform them of the hepatitis issue. And then, but that was when blading was still allowed back then. They were still doing it.
But that was only a few years ago.
It wasn't. It was a while ago now. Randy Orton and Undertaker, we're talking, 2004, 2005?
Oh,
yeah?
Yeah, it must have been, wasn't it? When he was going through that whole Legends Killer thing, and Undertaker was meant to be the pièce de résistance.
Oh, that's when Undertaker was actually working a full-time schedule.
Yes.
Yeah, and could actually work.
Wasn't doing house shows.
No, it wouldn't surprise me if he wasn't.
Hang on, there's a good point in the chat room by Priceless, right? Last TWS, if this was John Cena, would they make a big deal? No. Was anyone complaining about Cena at Extreme Rules when Lesnar devoured him? No. But with Punk, it's a bit pot kettle black.
It's a good point, actually. I mean, it is. We then go back to another conversation. Is Cena completely bulletproof?
Yeah.
In many ways, people would say yes, he is. But I don't know. I personally think, because I know there's I think Paul York put on a Facebook page about he didn't believe it was a blade job because you don't get staples in your head after a blade job. A very good point.
Depends how badly you busted open after you blade.
Not only that, I think you've also got to look at the well-being of the actual wrestler that's doing. I think a few names have been shoved around the chat room at the moment. Dusty Rhodes is a big one if you see his forehead. Abdel the Butcher, New Jack, Devon. Look at the state of their heads.
Yeah,
purely from blading.
Abdullah the Butcher's the big one if you think about the forehead and the amount of scarring.
Abdullah the Butcher was also recently in the news with regards to blading. It does link on with getting some independent guy allegedly giving him hepatitis, wasn't there? And there's still that going on. So, yeah, again, that, if anything, I think should ring bells to any wrestler not to blade.
That's when you're kind of taking your life in your own hands, isn't it? Because once you've got that, you're screwed, basically.
So, are we not arguing the case that, this sport, this great sport that we all love...
It's nice for you to call it that. It's nice for you to call it a sport and not sports entertainment.
Oh, I'm a smart fan, but I still look at it as, as a physical...
It's athletes.
Yeah.
It's two athletes in a ring or more, a minimum of two athletes in a ring, putting their bodies on the line.
I would go as far as saying putting their life in sometimes on the line.
Who they're working against.
With an opponent. Is it not dangerous enough to have that issue of broken limbs, paralysis, and all that kind of stuff, without having then put the risk of, well, I'm going to cut this person. I don't really know him from Adam. Yeah. I don't really know what he's up to in his personal life. Without being rude, with regards to, is he using protection in his love life? Is he doing this? Is he doing drugs? Whatever.
Is he a Ric Flair who's going out on the town every night back in the prime?
We have no idea what these people have. We are, if you're especially an independent show. We work a lot of independent wrestlers.
You don't see from one month to the next.
And they don't do. And I know WWE does stringent testing for hepatitis and all that kind of stuff. But, independent shows don't do that.
Okay,
so why take that risk?
So back in the day, a few years ago, it was only about 2010, I think it was a pay-per-view. Christian got cut open.
I was going to come to the same point.
And they stopped the match to clean it up. They got the sports doctor down, they cleaned him up, they then restarted the match. Based on what you're saying and looking at the health of the athletes that are in that ring, should WWE, Ring of Honor, independent companies, TNA, should they adopt that policy? If someone is cut, whether or not it's a slight cut or whatever, you stop the match, you patch them back up again, and then you restart it.
It's a really difficult argument because I remembered seeing just a couple of months after that Kane getting cut open the hard way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, doing.
Now there's no way with the character that Kane had, big heel monster.
Yeah.
That then a medic comes in and starts tabbing him on the head with a bit of cloth.
That being said, they did something similar when Rey Mysterio got busted over against CM Punk, and the way that Punk played it very well, because he went in and shoved the medic to one side. They managed to get him patched up quickly, but then he then carried on beating. You're right, it was Christian and Shelton Benjamin.
In the ladder match,
and
TLC.
They stopped the match. But then, I'm trying to think, I'm not a big, huge MMA fan, but with regard to something like MMA, that they will stop matches if there's excessive blood.
Because
boxing as well.
You got to think though, if you're in a match, especially with boxing, it's slightly different, because of the fact that you've got the glove protection. So if you punch, you're not actually going to get the blood on much of your hand. You're going to get it on your body if you do a clench. Fine. If you're in a wrestling match or an MMA fight or anything like that, and we've seen workers that have carried on matching with blood pouring down from them. Crimson Mask, Austin, Ric Flair.
Steam the chat rooms about Bret Hart and Rick at WrestleMania 8. It's
exactly.
a great example of that.
But when they then go for the cover, you see them and the other opponent are covered, absolutely dripping in blood. That's not safe for them. Do they then go and get tested?
Do you know, the weirdest thing is, like I said to you guys just before we come on the air, my mum phoned me just before I came down to the studio.
This was ironic.
This was really peculiar. And I was saying, I can't talk for very long. You've got to set the studio up, get down the studio, get things set up and stuff. And she went, oh yeah, she says, and she starts talking to me about wrestling. Now, people that listened quite a while ago know that she was the one that got me into wrestling. She watched TNA with me about a year ago and hated it and said, is this really what the business has come to?
She's still a big wrestling fan, isn't
But she's still got that wrestling fan in. But she said to me, why would anyone want to be a wrestler? And I said, what do you mean? She went, well, it's too dangerous. She says, and she doesn't know what we were going to talk about. I told her afterwards. She says, I don't understand why they do it. She says, it's got to be too dangerous. You're doing a sport or an entertainment that you're constantly every day going out and could be breaking bones, ripping, hurting yourself. She says, and then they sit there and then they take a blade and then cut open their own head. She said, are they even right?
From a fan perspective, that's a great point.
I think, to be fair, to answer a question, to be a wrestler, with the great respect to wrestlers who we've had the pleasure of interviewing, and people like Adam Cole who come on and will be back with us next week for his Road Diaries, I think you've got to be a little bit nutty in the head to go to be a wrestler anyway, to be dropped on your head on a regular basis and put your body on that kind of line.
Do you think, though, as wrestling fans and the industry, and I'm not talking about smart fans, I'm talking about wrestling fans. With us, we go to a show, okay? We sit there, we watch it, we cheer for the guy that we want to win, we boo for the guy that we want to, we don't want to win. We boo for the face, we boo for the heels. Do we, as fans, put so much pressure on these workers to kind of elevate what they did in the last match, or kind of beat that last match that was on the card, that they have to go to these dramatic actions in order to get that reaction from the crowd, in terms of blading, to get that crimson mask?
Do you know, that's actually I've got a really good point to illustrate this, and actually it kind of goes on to the next point we'll discuss about some of your best, or not best, memorable, bloodiest moments. Look back to that. It was a 4-way ladder match at Armageddon a couple of years ago with where Joe Mercury unfortunately lost half his face for it.
With the Hardys.
Yeah, think about that. That was yet again them trying to push the envelope with the ladder match, trying to do this seesaw situation.
Was that was December to December, wasn't it?
Nope, it was I think it was Armageddon. It was after December.
Okay.
And they, and basically to do to think about it, you're going to jump off the top rope, you're going to land on one end, and you're going to have someone else's head at the other end. Even from a layman's point of view, that's not going to end well. But we've got to push the ladder. We keep pushing the ladder, and I think a lot of it has got to come back to the fans. We point the fingers squarely back at ourselves and myself.
What we were just trying to say, just getting to.
That's my point. So it was an illustrated point that these guys put more and more on the line. And is that right? I suppose there's an answer for yes and there's an answer no for it.
Check your message now.
We've got a text.
We have. This is from Chewy. I hope you're sitting comfortably.
Oh, is it? What is it?
Here we go. He said, I believe there is a place for blood in wrestling if it's used in the right manner. Overuse such as it was back in the old ECW days limits its impact. Instead, it should be used sparingly to increase its impact. I understand the issue with sponsors. One way round this may to be only show brief close-ups of the juiced stars. This, coupled with a bit of blood on the canvas opponents, such as when Lawler's blood was on Punk's wrist wraps, could be a good compromise.
Okay, I see his point there.
Didn't they at one point, when they show back, that if there's blood, it's black and white?
Yeah, well, if actually the pictures from on WWE.com of that match of Lawler and Punk are in black and white.
Do you remember back to really going back in the day, SummerSlam '88, and it was meant to be the IC title match, which the Honky Tonk and the Ultimate Warrior did.
Yep.
It was meant to be Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
Yes.
And on episode, I think it was Superstars at the time, he was against the Outlaw Ron Bass,
and they carved him up allegedly with the
and they put the big cross across the screen. Remember back in the day? That to me was more impactful watching it at that time, because you were sat there going, what the hell has happened? And all you could hear was the commentary.
Less is sometimes more, is what you're saying then.
Yeah, completely.
You get the theatre of the mind can sometimes be more impactful than the actual theatre you see on TV.
But that's the art of storytelling, and that's what the announcers are there for, to try and put it over. A couple of great comments in the chat room. Dom, new listener, Cody Rhodes got busted open recently, and they took the spot off SmackDown.
That was against Randy Orton.
Yeah, exactly. Scotty 220. If they stop the match, it makes it look more like a professional fight, but it stops momentum and takes away from the overall enjoyment of the match.
That's actually a really good point, actually, from Scotty there, because that wrestling is about a flow. Any match which flows and then almost builds to this crescendo is what we as fans, the smart or normal fans, class as a good match, could get you into it. That's my biggest issue with boxing. And also mixed martial arts at the point, because you have this kind of round ability, and when you have rounds, you have this pause. And in my opinion, it takes them the feel away. It's like the old British wrestling round situation.
It always used to be like that, didn't it? Rounds.
But then, if you've got a really good fight and you're at the edge of your seat, okay, and you're let's say I'm going to pick two MMA fighters at a random.
Yep.
I don't know, GSP and Frank Mir, right?
Yep.
They're not in the same weight category, but let's just say that they were. You're watching the fight. You've got to the end of round one. Yeah, cracking fight. They've had takedown after takedown, a couple of knockouts, and they've got back up. You're at the edge of your seat. Then it goes. You don't wait. It whets your appetite for more. You are then salivating for more.
No, but I think that's probably the wrestling fan in me, because I've been wrestling fan for donkey's years. You're almost what's the word? Conditioned into seeing that you don't have these breaks. You don't have these pull aparts. Guys will physically start building up and building up and then build, and then you have this dramatic. Because it's a story, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have this almost dramatic kind of climax of what's actually going to happen to the actual show. So I can see a point, and I do say I know obviously there's a need for it, because mixed martial arts is so huge and so prevalent, and maybe transitioning slightly off topic. This is something that wrestling needs to do. We talk about the next evolution of wrestling. Maybe the evolution of wrestling is actually a devolution and going back to the rounds.
You know what? We talk about the Attitude Era a lot as wrestling fans. Not on this show per se, but as wrestling fans, we talk about it a lot. How it was the crowning glory of pro wrestling. You know, it was the best era to watch. It was the best matches. But as Tax put in the chat room, we need to get back to the rock and wrestling era where characters were more colourful and matches were safer. Has the Attitude Era ruined us as wrestling fans and ruined the sport? Because yes, it was more gritty, more cutting edge, but actually what it's done is it's once you get that taste of blood in your mouth,
excuse the pun,
yeah, you get a taste for it, you get a feel for it.
Do you think there's more of a craving for the Attitude Era to come back, because they're even releasing the new
Attitude
WWE
Era
game
TV.
as an Attitude Era game?
Yeah, that's what I was going to try and get to.
Do you think it's kind of that's why?
To be honest, I don't, because do you know the problem I think is it's not so much the fact that we need to go back a step, it's the fact that fans are too smart nowadays. The internet has really affected people's enjoyment, not just of wrestling, but of all sport and TV. Because there's so many things as spoilers, there's so many behind the scene documentaries. It's changed the sport. Back in the day when it was rock and wrestling, yeah, we had the colourful characters, but because we believed they were real, because we didn't know any different. This fourth wall that we as fans are so keen to chip down and knock down, and to be fair, is there even a fourth wall nowadays?
No, there isn't.
You know, that's part of our own fault. We wanted to know more, and all we've done in some ways, in my opinion, is ruined it for ourselves.
Do you want to see... Sorry, go on, Andy.
No, carry on.
I was just going to say, do you want to see people bleed?
Personally, it's a very tricky answer. If you put me on a spot, yes or no, I would say yes with an asterisk, and that asterisk would be it needs to be for a big event and it needs to mean something. If it doesn't, if it's like it was with Impact, maybe about a year or so ago, we had Impact was bleeding every week. Someone in Impact was bleeding every week, and it could be like a minor, it could be an X Division wrestler.
Kind of lost its appeal.
Exactly, it's got to be something big, it's got to be something impactful, and it's got to mean something.
Steve, you asked the question. Your turn.
Yeah,
to
no,
answer.
that's fine. Do you know what? I kind of go along with Dan, but my answer would be no, but probably with the same stipulation. If it was going to happen, make it mean something. You think a few years ago we had first blood matches. I mean, that was taking everything then far to the extreme.
Thing is, though,
and I'm a big fan of ECW.
Yeah.
But I've watched both the recent, well, not recent, but the Hardcore Homecomings. And do you know what? It just goes to prove, even in that product, hardly anyone bled because it didn't need it.
A good wrestling match doesn't need blood.
Yeah.
And I think if you are going to do it, it should only be on one of the big shows. If it's TNA, it should be BFG or Slammiversary. You know, if it's WWE, it should be Mania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, or the Rumble. One of those big ones that's going to make an impact, like what you were saying.
The problem we've got now is with WWE. Now we've had this incident with Punk, and it was fairly prevalent, even though it was... Okay, so let's say it was Hardway, for the sake of argument. If WWE were planning to do it for a big spot, say they're planning on doing it on the next Lesnar match than Blood, it's not going to have that same impact, because we've just seen it on Raw.
Yeah, exactly.
On free TV.
I think that's what it is. One question I also wanted to ask... We've mentioned Bret Hart, we've mentioned Vince McMahon. Do you think they're the biggest sort of iconic moments of someone bleeding in a match? Sorry, not Bret Hart, the Bret Hart match with Steve Austin.
But when did they happen?
So long ago.
No, what event did they happen at?
WrestleMania?
Those two iconic moments happened at Mania, and they stick in your mind.
no,
Triple H, Shawn Michaels triple threat match with Chris Benoit.
That was Mania.
One of them wasn't at Mania. The Vince McMahon one, when he bled from the chair shot by Zach Gowen.
Oh no,
I think it was at No Mercy or something like that. That was an incredibly impactful shot. Joe Mercury, granted Hardway, but that was on an Armageddon show.
Okay, let's go to the chat room. Let's go to a couple of comments in the chat. We have got a text come through. We'll get to that in a second. The Monday Night Wars caused wrestlers and promotions to constantly try, it's gone off the screen, and outdo what happened the week before and take more risks. That's from Scotty220. Jamie, Hogan bled in his then WWF title match against Slaughter at WrestleMania 7.
He did, yep.
He certainly did. Tack, this is a great one. Has Steve Austin ruined wrestling? He made bleeding iconic and heralded the kick Punk WWE main event style. Priceless. Blood on Impact every week, all thanks to Ric Flair. Crash Murdoch, if they could go back to the storyline consistency of the Attitude Era, it wouldn't necessarily need the blood, sex and over-the-top violence. Do you guys remember when it was a surprise when someone showed up on Raw?
Can I go back to the comment that Crash Murdoch's made there, actually? He said go back to the consistency of the storyline of the Attitude Era. I think we look at a lot of this Attitude Era with the old rose-tinted glasses. Do we remember some of the god-awful storylines we had? We had Kai and Tai trying to cut off Val Venus's John Thomas.
Let's say it. Katie Vick.
Katie Vick technically wasn't Attitude. It was more in the 2000s. We were technically out of the Attitude
We were
Era.
coming out of the
We were in the
Attitude.
HLA area at that point.
Mae Young gave birth to a hand.
Thank you. Yeah, we had Terry Reynolds, allegedly blackmailing D'Lo Brown because he lost her baby. You had those kind of. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with DX. We had a lot of fun with Austin, the corporate ministry, all that kind of stuff. But then we had this rubbish. The dog poo match, as Tax put in the chat room.
Check your message now.
Chewy again, actually.
Chewy's prevalent on our text.
He is, isn't he?
Really is.
So the picture of Vince McMahon's evil eyes peering up from the outside of the ring is a prime iconic example where blood was used well.
It was. No,
And that will always go down as a moment. I'll always remember if someone says to me, I know everyone's sort of gone on to the Steve Austin in the sharpshooter, but if anyone says to me, what moment do you remember of someone bleeding, it would be Vince McMahon. Not just for the blood though, but it was for the evil look on the face at the same time.
Do you know what the scary thing is, though? We talk about iconic moments of blood, and we've mentioned the Bret Hart, Steve Austin, we've mentioned the Austin one. I don't know about you guys, but I find it very difficult to actually remember blood moments. And that is, I can remember those two because they're the big ones that you see shoved down your face. I also remember the Hardcore Holly one where he did the on the table at ECW. Yeah. But that's because you it's on promos and you see it all the time. And this is another thing that I wanted to get to on this talking point. They bleed, they lose God knows how much blood, they put their lives at risk, but actually, how many of them can you remember?
We're talking about, I want to go back about a lot about those kind of Crimson Mask jobs and the kind of issue of contamination and that kind of stuff. It just kind of struck me. Unforgiven, I think it was 2007, we had the Hell in a Cell match with the McMahons and Big Show taking on DX.
Yeah.
Right. Vince McMahon bled bucket loads that match, and he then, at the end of the match, had his head shoved up
The Big Show's
Show's bare backside. I mean, just from the point of view of contamination, I know maybe I'm being a bit picky, but...
No, you're right. You're completely right. But the point I was trying to get to there, do you think it's a shame that they put the amount of blood that they lose and their life on the line, and we can hardly remember moments?
There's one that Tax brought up that we haven't even mentioned, and it illustrates your point beautifully. Eddie Guerrero losing the WWE title to JBL at, I think it was a Great American Bash, and I think Guerrero legitimately had to go to the hospital to get a blood transfusion.
That's just the thing. I cannot remember that. I can remember the match, but I can't remember him bleeding.
So that's the point. Is that then maybe that's because back then it was so prevalent. Now when it happens again, when we're talking about CM Punk accidentally potential or maybe possibly did on purpose bleeding, that is the reason why this talking point come up, because it has been so long. If it was happening every week, I guarantee you we would not be having this conversation.
We wouldn't. We might be having the conversation of, are they doing it too much?
Well, we did, if you remember, right? Back in the beginning of TWS, we actually had a discussion on the show, on one of the Impact reviews, where we said it's ruining the product, it's ruining the show, it's ruining Flair's legacy by blading too much.
Well, there's loads of comments in the chat room now. We're going to get into some feedback on Facebook in a second.
Yeah, we have loads of it.
There's lots of memories there. Scott has come up with another great one I'd forgotten about. Hell in a Cell, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, when Kane debuted. Shawn Michaels was laying physically in a pool of his blood around his head where he bled so much. He had that scar down his forehead for years. So it actually kind of seemed to fade.
It's quite scary, really, if you think about it.
Let's
they put themselves through.
Let's go to Facebook at TWS Live on Facebook. We wanted your comments, and you guys, as always, did not let us down.
Well, Stuart Thompson kicks it off. Of course, Stuart was the one who came up with the idea of the talking point. I know Punk has been denying it all day on Twitter, but it was pretty blatant. I was shocked to see it, but pretty happy in a way. Nor he or Robinson would have done it without McMahon's permission, in my opinion. So he must approve the idea. We'll come back to that in a second. And I think it does add to the brutal matches like Cage Hardcore. My favourite bloody moments include those in the Triple H Foley rivalry in early 2000, the infamous Austin Brett match. The blood was so effective in that moment, made the sharpshooter look utterly amazing. And that's it. Last week we talked about finishers and how impactful that they are and what they kind of mean to a match. That symbolised in that moment how devastating the sharpshooter was, because blood was used effectively.
Yeah, I agree. However, I think that would have been much more prevalent and much more impactful. We used that word a lot tonight. But Ben on the sharpshooter works the lower back and the legs. If that was something like cripple a crossface,
or the
sleeper,
the go to sleep,
we're talking about submission moves, aren't we? Maybe, or even the Anaconda Vice.
The Anaconda, that's what I was trying to get to. Sorry.
That would have a huge impact. Don't go. It was still a great visual, and I think it was more Austin's portrayal of the pain. And they even made a T-shirt out of it. The Bloodstone T-shirt.
Yeah, they did.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
Buy. That's really. it really count? It makes a difference.
Scotty 220 beat me to their Brood's blood baths count.
No, because it was ketchup.
I think I had to find it was actually animal blood.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I believe that's what they use.
Oh, right, okay. David Whitehead, blood is fine for effect in big matches or pay-per-view. It can definitely help you buy into the match. If you think that the blood loss might put the wrestler in kayfabe peril, Foley, Triple H and Ric Flair are three of the best bleeders in the business, no pun intended.
Yeah, I think Flair always gets a lot of comments about blood.
It's a shame when that's what you remember more about Flair at the moment.
Do you think he used to bleed more because of the colour of his own hair, the same as Dusty?
I think
because when you've got that real blonde white hair, then you get bladed or whatever, and you start bleeding, and then it piles through your head. Dustin Rhodes did it.
Yeah.
With Ted DiBiase.
The problem with Flair is the fact that because he was in the twilight of his run anyway, and he couldn't really work anymore, he had to think of a way of getting the attention back onto himself and getting that pop and getting that sort of crowd response. And for him, and it's a shame to say it, he went down the blading route. And whether or not, and TNA have got to take some responsibility for allowing that to go out on TV.
And for it to
Same
continue.
with Spike.
Yeah.
Spike have got to take responsibility for that because they're the ones who allowed it on the show.
Yeah, completely. Do agree. Shane Edwin Paul on Facebook went on to say, I remember when I first saw blood, it was I was a 16-year-old watching the Bret Hart versus Steve Austin at WrestleMania 13, and as a 16-year-old I was shocked by it. I might even go as far as thinking it was disgusting. Over the years I found it being used more and more. I was getting desensitized. I lost all meaning, and it just became part of the match. Seeing it again this past Monday, I haven't seen it for a long time, and was shocking.
Do you know, that's a really good point. We said that a lot tonight. That's a really good point with regards to what Shane's put there. The desensitizing to it as it went on. The more you see something,
It's like chair shots.
yeah, the more you see it, it's like if you see a horror film.
Yeah.
You see a sequel to a horror film, they do the same kind of gory stuff.
Yeah.
It desensitizes you to the violence.
Yeah. Completely.
Same as the computer games as well, I suppose, isn't it? These shooting or killing computer
like
games.
the GTA games or the Resident Evil games.
They've kind of build you up
Yeah.
until the point now that you actually want the game to get more
Scary, more violent.
violent, more extreme.
Shane Jones, I'm pretty sure a blade job doesn't need that many staples in his head. I'm still not convinced he bladed. I just don't see what blading in a poor match against the King achieves. I guess though, nobody's talking about how awful the match was. And that's a good point. No one is talking about that match. They are talking about one aspect of it. It's getting attention. It's getting
The wrong kind of attention, maybe.
Yeah, but it is. But I tell you what it's doing. What are we doing right now?
We're talking about it.
Good or bad,
Yeah,
we're
true.
talking about it, and
Yeah.
that's what they want. All over social media, they are talking about this.
Well, our Facebook page, we threw the thread up almost as a half-hearted kind of, okay, let's see what we can find to discuss this after Stuart Thompson suggested it. If I was honest, I didn't think we were going to get half the comments we got, and we got you guys delivered in spades.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
David Perrin, I think wrestling needs blood, but only in matches with steps like the cage match on Raw, but not in every match with steps. Also, it makes it look more real, and if it looks more real, more people will watch it.
I think that's a good point, actually. Then you guys, again, are always doing these great points. If you're going to use blood, use it to make it seem realistic. So if you've got a cage match, you've got a TLC match, you've got maybe not a Falls Count Anywhere match, maybe it doesn't work as well, but anything where you're using physical weapons, Elimination Chamber, that kind of stuff, it works really well. Punjabi Prison, no.
Lethal Lockdown.
Lethal Lockdown.
When you know that you've got a whole list of weapons, metal, steel, cage,
If you don't bleed in that match,
there would be something wrong, really, wouldn't there? To be perfectly honest. A lot of the points that came through on Facebook were kind of echoing a lot of the stuff. Like I go on to Christopher Hayward said, with WWE going PG and outlawing chair shots to the head, we're starting to see less and less blood on TV, which is a good thing. Blood to be used sparingly in the case of blading, or be something that happens accidentally in the course of a match, i.e. one of the divas getting a split lip from a punch, or Hardcore Holly cutting his back going through a table. It went well with CM Punk's match that he would beat the King bloody, but it was feasible that the King could have a cut on his face on the cage.
certainly, definitely. Sybil, our very own Sybil, after TNA did the whole let's bleed in every match on every show, it's all a tad too much. It is better if it's an actual ouchie, I love that, rather than a blade.
It's rather an ouchie.
Rather than ouchie. Danny Mountford, my favourite bloody moment of all time has to be the image of Austin in the sharpshooter, bleeding badly at WrestleMania 13. Was it 13 or was it 12?
13.
It was 13. And that, do you know what? Danny's kind of encapsulates what everyone else said. That's the main one that everyone mentions. But is it because it's Austin? Is it because it's Brett? Is it because of WrestleMania? There have been other gruesome ones we've all seen, but is it that we remember it because it has been shoved down our throats so much by WWE?
It's on that. Well, it's on everywhere you look. On every recap package for WrestleMania, that scene is there. On every Austin memory package, that scene is there. On the intro to the shows, that scene is there. And it's that's something that we let be happen. Going back to a point in the chat room, just remember, WWE let Punk bleed, otherwise it would not have happened. Why would Punk risk it otherwise? It's from Jamie. You've got to think that McMahon would have signed it off, or Kevin Dunn would have signed it off, or Triple H would have signed it off if he was going to blade.
Yeah.
If it's a genuine ouchie, to quote Sybil, then there's nothing you can do about it.
See, I was led to believe that the policy was, if you don't get seen,
You don't get caught.
if you don't get caught, if you don't do it baiting, because I remember someone, I think it might have even been Flair, that got caught a few years ago, fined quite a few $1,000s because he did it so blatantly on camera.
Yeah.
And actually and it was filmed and shown on TV.
That's one of the reasons I miss blading as well, because sometimes some guys, and I'm not saying necessarily the guys, it always comes down to the cameraman and the director. You see them actually zoom in and see these guys physically with that
I remember one match in WCW with Hogan.
Yeah.
And you clearly saw him pull the blade out of the trunks and cut the head.
I think they did it fairly recently on, well, not so very, when TNA were quite prevalent. I'm sure TNA showed it, and it was a real sloppy kind of
Flair.
camera shot.
It was
No,
Flair.
it wasn't Flair, it was
Wasn't it?
someone else. I want to say Hernandez. And
that wouldn't surprise
And he
me.
got minimal blood, but they decided they were going to zoom straight in on it.
Why?
We commentated on the show, we mentioned it
Why?
on the show. It's stupid.
Tax put a comment in the chat room. Does it not just help Punk's rebel image to think that he maybe went against policy and bladed?
But that then kind of breaks that fourth wall down even further from WWE's point of view. So actually, yes, we don't let our guys blade. WWE want us still to believe it's real.
Yeah.
I see what he's saying, but it doesn't necessarily work.
Jamie said in the chat room, Flair got caught at Lockdown 2010. He watched the pay-per-view yesterday.
There you go.
Yeah. There is a poll still running to the right-hand side of the chat room, though, and that is blading necessary in the modern-day professional wrestling? And we'll give the results of that poll towards the end of the show.
And this conversation will continue on Facebook at TWS Live. Thank you for your comments so far. We're going to take our first commercial break of the evening, and when we come back, we've got all the news, plus we've got prizes to give away, a new competition, and we've got news from the TNA fan party. Stay tuned.